What's up, Tsla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets, and break down some important news that just came out for Tesla that could be causing some volatility. What I think is going to happen to the share price as we're seeing a new trend developing. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Mumu link that's down below, or use my QR code right over here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free NVIDIA stock. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're going to get $50 worth of NVIDIA plus a $100 cash reward. If you deposit $10,000 or more, you're going to get $300 worth of NVIDIA plus $100, or deposit $50,000 or more to get $1,000 of free NVIDIA stock plus $100. You're also going to qualify for an 8.1% APY on invested cash. The offer ends very soon, so please use my link down below to sign up. Anyways, as far as Tesla's going, I want to mention that we have kind of like two interesting wicks that formed right here at very similar levels. The last time Tesla tested this like 415 area, we got a small bounce, and we formed a wick right here trying to reclaim our 50 EMA. Tesla's also in a very, very interesting place. It dumped really hard, going from 480 all the way down to 417 within 2 days, which is crazy. So I would not think that it's unusual to call for a potential bounce, just some kind of defensive bounce right over here. But even if we do this, could this just be the start of like a head and shoulders like pattern that eventually leads to more downside and this gap fill all the way down in the 390s, right? Because when you zoom out of Tesla like this, you could also see that we have a potential. This is like a left shoulder right over here, right? This big pump was like our head. And are we about to form kind of like a right shoulder by shuffling for some time, then eventually dipping as we approach, earnings or even after earnings? So we'll see about that. But this is what Tesla could be doing if we see this head and shoulders pan out. Now, before we get too ahead of ourselves, though, the head and shoulders barely doesn't even have like a right shoulder yet. So we're going to be looking for a balance for now and just take it one step at a time, right? A comes before B, excuse me, before C, D, and E. It's better to just take it one step at a time, and we're going to take it just like that. So Tesla had a very, very awesome amount of sales. Their deliveries were at 497,000, which is a new record for the company. But the problem is that now that we have priced that in, the EV demand is going to be coming down. Now that the EV tax credit has come to an end, it may negatively affect Tesla for the short term. For the long term, Tesla will be fine because the EV sales are on a very, very big uptrend in the US and globally, and their sales will increase as years progress. But for now, for the short term, there are some concerns about that. Now, despite that, Morgan Stanley still gave Tesla an overweight rating, and there is still a lot of optimism. But the price-price ratio is dropping, which means that Tesla is losing some strength. And also, like I talked about in my previous videos, October is the weakest month of the year for Tesla. We're actually only green 1/3 of the time. So, with all the statistics, October is known for being a weak month. We just started October and look how much Tesla has dumped. It's pretty crazy. So it just goes to show once again how seasonality is also another affecting role for Tesla and how it may affect us as time goes on. Now, a couple of things to know for the week. Even though the federal government is not releasing the data because of the fact that the government has shut down, there are some private sector indicators that are still showing that hiring is very sluggish and there is weakness in the labor markets. So we're still seeing weakness, at least for the month of September, right over here on our different indicators. Besides that, though, I want to add on that with the demand that's cooling down and hiring that's slowing, the labor market is sending mixed signals, which could once again help the Fed to potentially cut more. They want to act preemptively before waiting too long. And that's something very important because Myron, who's from the Fed today, he was the main speaker. He is saying that he wants aggressive rate cuts and he wants them as soon as possible. If they don't happen, he's saying that there's going to be likely some downwards pressure for the economy. He's not saying it's going to be the extent of a recession, but it's going to be tough still, which is why he thinks the Fed has to get ahead of the curve and not be behind it. Now the market thinks there's a 94.6% chance we get some kind of cut, a 25 basis point cut in October. We're also pricing in a cut in December, so we'll see how it goes. A couple more things. The Fed is also going to continue to function during the government shutdown, and we're going to see what happens at least for the next couple of meetings. So there's going to likely be, once again, FOMC, and also we have the FOMC minutes coming soon. So with that being said, let's talk about the economic calendar, and I'll break down Tesla stock in just a couple of minutes. So for Monday, we just have a couple of bill auctions and nothing else that's too significant. On Tuesday, however, we actually have Myron from the Fed giving a speech. We have Kashkari giving a speech. Then we have just minor data. But the exports and imports data will not be coming out because of the government shutdown. For Wednesday, it's minor data as well, nothing way too serious, but we do have the FOMC minutes later on. I believe this will be coming out from the sources I'm finding. So we have some big data on Wednesday. Everything is minor in the morning, but then in the afternoon, we have the FOMC minutes. Thursday, we have the big guy, Jerome Powell, giving a speech. He's going to be speaking, I believe, before the market even opens. Then we have Bowman giving a speech and other pieces of data. But then we're not going to likely be getting initial jobless claims due to the government shutdown. Some jobs numbers will not be coming out. Then for Friday, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiments data, which may also cause some volatility. So keep that in mind. There's some data coming out. We have Jerome Powell giving a speech, and we also have the FOMC minutes. The minutes reports is just going to be a report on paper. It's not necessarily FOMC. There's a big difference. And then for earnings, next week is quiet. We just have minor earnings, but this is, I believe, the final minor earnings week because in 2 weeks, I believe that we're going to be starting the big bank earnings. We typically start with them. And then 3 weeks from now, we should be starting big tech earnings. So just a couple of weeks, we have a lot of big earnings coming out. So be ready. For now, we have one more quiet earnings week, and then things get very, very serious. Now, the fear and greed index is currently at neutral. It's not too greedy, not too fearful. Momentum is at neutral, and we also have the put to call option ratio at extreme greed, whereas the VIX is starting to climb a bit. So we're going to see how that ends up affecting the markets. So with that being said, what do I think is going to happen moving forward? What is my prediction? Well, I think that Tesla is trying to hold the 50 EMA. If we hypothetically cannot hold 425, we're looking for a dump all the way down to like 415 again. But because we formed a big wick here, the odds do favor a small bounce for essentially the 440 area. And then we could be looking for a bit of a shuffle. But then this kind of looks like a left shoulder ahead and a right shoulder to me, and that could also be indicative of more downside. Also, I want to add that on the daily time frame, Tesla still has this big gap down here, all the way down to 395. So, like I was saying, this is kind of like your left shoulder like this, right? This is like a head, and then this could be like a right shoulder that forms if it gets some kind of bounce. And then is that going to lead Tesla to dumping towards 395 very soon? It's possible. So be very, very careful. Don't forget that October tends to be a bearish month for Tesla, so seeing some downside would not be a surprise. But simultaneously, it's also another very, very good buying opportunity. The lower Tesla goes, we have a chance to buy up shares before we see another rally for the November to December period. But the downside risk is still there for Tesla. We might bounce temporarily next week, and I think the odds favor that. Depending on the news and such, of course, we'll have to see what happens on the news, but I do think Tesla could bounce a little bit, and then we'll see if we end up dipping later on. So keep that in mind. SPY may also bounce a little bit, but I do want to warn you guys about it. Also, this has a head and shoulders. So I think that's the 50 EMA. The yellow line is going to be trending towards this 665 area. And we basically have a left shoulder, kind of like a head. And if we bounce a bit, we could be looking for like 670. And we need to break 672 to be really bullish. If we break 672, I'm going to remain bullish. But if we don't, this looks like a left shoulder, head and right shoulder. And that could also be favoring a move back down to 665 or below. Then we'll see if we get some kind of big bounce after that. Now, a lot of the time, SPY dips on like Mondays and Tuesdays, but then we love to bounce on like Thursdays and Fridays. So if we have a head and shoulders, we could be dipping back down towards our key EMAs. Then we could be bouncing afterwards if we get some kind of like defensive move from the buyers. So that's also very, very possible. So we'll see what happens with this head and shoulders like pattern. Do we get some kind of bounce or not? Do we continue to dump? I want to just warn you guys to be careful. I think SPY is at risk of dipping, but it depends on this big test. So before we draw this out, let's just look at this one step at a time. Look for a small bounce on Monday. Can we break 672 to remain bullish? If we can, I'm going to remain bullish. But if we come short and we get some kind of rejection move, we're looking for a head and shoulders top, and that could take us down for that 665 mark, followed by a potential bounce off our 20 or 50 EMA. Basically, the 50 EMA is down here. So that is what could be coming. We'll see just to be safe. So take it one step at a time, and I'll give you guys more updates later on. The QQQ also got a bit of a rejection. So just so you guys know, we were correct about the upside that was coming. The market did pump to new all-time highs. We held all-time highs for many hours, but then at the end of the day, the market sold off, and that's when the shift happened. So for the triple Q, we need to get back above 607 to be bullish. We might bounce a little bit, but if we end up losing 602.3, we're going to be looking for a dump back down to like 598. Then we'll see if we get some kind of bounce after that. But notice that this kind of resembles a distributive pattern. We could bounce near 602, then kind of turn back down, and we'll see what happens after that. For the IWM, there's a gap down here to fill. So you want to see us basically push back above 248. We could kind of pop a bit, then start dipping back down to like 243. Then we'll see if we bounce or not off of that. So you want to be very careful, but there is that gap to fill. So I do think the IWM could come down if we reject near 247. On ES, just real quick, ES is looking pretty good right now, but I am seeing the 4-hour PPO crossover. So we have support at 67.54. Could bounce off this and start dipping to 67.28. Then we'll see if we bounce off that. But there is a downside risk. Also, it's like a left shoulder ahead, and then maybe we're about to form kind of like a right shoulder, like that. And then we start to kind of turn. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. NQ may pop a bit for 25,000. Notice we actually are below 25,000, so acting as resistance, which could take us down to 24,800. Then we'll see if we bounce, but I see some downside risk. Bitcoin is doing well, but here's the problem. The last times we hit 124,000, we got rejection on Bitcoin. So we're at resistance right now. Can we break 124,000, continue? Or do we kind of like touch that, then dip back down towards 121,000, and we'll see how it goes from there. For Tesla, like I said before, I think that because we dumped so hard, I would not be surprised if we kind of gap up or even try to bounce a bit on Monday. But then it might just be kind of like a temporary move up to 440 and then some consolidation before we turn back down. Nvidia is going to dip to 186 and eventually 184, and we'll see if we bounce. Aapl might be retesting 255, and we'll see if we bounce or not. Palantir might be retesting 178 to 180, then we'll see if we turn back down from there, but there is upside potential. AMD could be retesting 162.5 or a little bit below that, then we'll see if we bounce, but there is downside potential. Coinbase has resistance right here at 380 and support down here at 372, so it could be dipping back down a little bit. There is a risk of us seeing a pivot back down to the lower 370s, and we'll see how it goes. Amazon might be retesting 221, and we'll see if we reject or not. We're going to have to see if we have a double bottom here. Now, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders, so it might bounce a little bit better. But we need to retest these highs. We're going to break them to really break out. For now, we'll look for a test of 221, and we'll see if it rejects or not. There's different ways to kind of interpret that. Meta is kind of weak here. We're making lower highs. We need to get back above 728s to be bullish. I could see us retest 718, but then if we reject, we could be dipping to like 700 flats. We have an inverse centralized like pattern on Google. It might consolidate and try to break out for 250, and we'll see if it rejects or not. Of course, it depends on different factors. You could also argue that we're making lower highs. This is about to dip, but there's a bullish and a bearish case. I do think we might pop a bid for like 248 to 250. Microsoft's got to hold 515. If we lose that, we're looking for 513. If we hold this, we could bounce, so there is some downside risk. The VIX, it has a potential flag forming, so it kind of looks like this. I would not be surprised if the VIX kind of like comes down a bit as the market tries to pop a bit. But if we get a breakout, that could be a sign the market's going to pull back just a little bit. And SPY might retest like 665 if the head and shoulders pan out. Let's see if we reject. So don't just short the market to oblivion. Wait for confirmation. Do we pop and then reject, or do we break the highs and turn back to bullish? We'll see. There is a risk of us kind of popping, then rejecting, kind of turning a little bit. And as a result, Tesla, it might pop for 440, come back down and consolidate for some time, but then there is still some more downside risk later on down the line for the gap fill in the 390s because of the current trend. But I do think we're going to try to bounce. We're going to attempt to bounce first. There might be an attempt to bounce looking at the current setup. We're forming a wick here, holding our 50 EMA. It might try to go a little higher, and then we'll see if Tesla rejects again. So keep that in mind. Anyways, I wish you all nothing but the best. Please enjoy your guys' weekends, and I'll be back very soon with another upload to give you guys more updates about what's happening with Tesla in the markets. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a good one, and peace out.